All right, so you're thinking about a career change, becoming a biology teacher, huh? That's amazing. It sounds like you're already knee-deep in research with these RoleCatcher resources.
And you're not just skimming the surface either. You're really diving deep into the nitty-gritty with these, going way beyond the typical career guide stuff.
That's what we like to see, and you're coming at this at a really interesting time.
Absolutely. This role catcher career guide, the one we're looking at, it highlights something really important. There's a growing need for STEM teachers.
Right, everyone always talks about that, but what does it actually mean for someone starting out now?
Well, did you know that this whole field is projected to grow, get this, by 4%?
Wow, that's significant.
It is. And the guide even directly links it to something, the increasing demand for, well, STEM professionals in general.
Which makes sense, right? More STEM jobs, you're going to need more STEM teachers.
Exactly. So this is actually great news for anyone entering the field. More demand often means what?
More opportunities, for sure.
Yeah. And maybe even a little bit more, leverage when it comes to negotiating your salary once you get to that point, of course.
Okay, so that's really encouraging. Let's get into the real nitty-gritty here. The guide goes into a lot of detail about what a biology teacher, what they actually do on a daily basis.
Right, because it's one thing to kind of like idealize the job, but it's another to actually know what you're getting into day to day.
Totally. We're talking like lesson plans, right? Engaging lesson plans, bringing science to life in the lab, making it fun for kids who have seen it all online.
And of course, let's not forget that constant interaction with students.
Which I'm sure can be both rewarding and challenging, am I right?
It's that human element, it's so crucial to being a good teacher. And this guide really emphasizes that. It emphasizes this importance of really clear communication and collaboration, not just with your students, but also with your colleagues, the other teachers, and with parents.
Because teaching, at the end of the day, it goes way beyond just the classroom walls.
Exactly. It's a much bigger ecosystem. Now, speaking of challenges, one thing I appreciated about the guide is it doesn't sugarcoat things. It's very honest.
Right. It doesn't shy away from the tougher parts of the job. And there are some, let's be real. I mean, dealing with a classroom full of, teenagers, that can be a challenge.
I think we can all relate to that, even if it's just thinking back to our own teenage years.
That's right. Or kids or nieces and nephews. Remember that story I told you about that one kid? He was in my high school biology class, and we were doing that frog dissection.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
This kid, he decides that his frog, it deserves a proper Viking funeral. And where does he decide to hold this funeral? In the classroom sink.
Oh, no. Stop.
It was quite the memorable experience, let me tell you. But anyway, I digress. Back to the challenges.
Right. So the guide, it brings up some very real concerns. Things like the long hours teachers work, often going above and beyond, dealing with limited resources, which I'm sure is a common one, especially in education. And then there's the big one, the potential for burnout.
Yeah, burnout is real in any profession, but especially in a field as demanding as teaching.
Absolutely. And it's not something to be taken lightly. So, this guide really makes you realize that teaching, becoming a biology teacher, it's not a career for just anyone.
Right. You need to be passionate about it, obviously. You have to really want to work with kids, and you have to be adaptable. Things don't always go according to plan, as we've established, and resilient.
Resilience is huge because you're going to face setbacks. You might have lessons that just totally flop or students who are struggling, but you can't let those things get you down. You have to be able to bounce back and keep going.
And I feel like this guide, it's almost like it's speaking directly to you when it talks about these things, these qualities, like problem solving. It emphasizes that a lot. Being a problem solver, being able to think on your feet.
Absolutely, and lifelong learning. The field of biology, it's constantly evolving. New discoveries are being made all the time. So you need to be willing to stay up to date, keep learning new things throughout your career.
Which I think ties into what we were saying earlier about passion, right? If you're truly passionate about a subject, you're naturally going to want to keep learning about it, keep up with the latest development.
Precisely. It's about having that real, genuine drive to make a difference, not just in the lives of your students, like individually, but also potentially in the field of education itself.
So it's almost like a ripple effect, right? You impact your students, they go on to impact the world, and so on. It's pretty powerful when you think about it that way.
It is. And the guide even touches on that a bit. It highlights all these different ways that you can actually specialize and grow as a biology teacher.
Which I think is really cool. You don't just have to be like a biology teacher. You can be, say, a biology teacher who specializes in, I don't know, genetics or ecology or whatever area really sparks your interest.
And that's what's so great about it. You can really tailor it to your strengths, to your passions.
Speaking of tailoring things, I really liked how the guide breaks down the career progression, from entry-level positions all the way up to like senior roles.
It's really helpful to see that laid out, especially if you're just starting out,
Hmm.
because it gives you a sense of, okay, here's where I am now, but here are all these other possibilities. It kind of opens up your perspective.
Yeah, and they even include those example profiles of biology teachers at different stages in their careers.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to kind of get a feel for what does an entry-level biology teacher's day-to-day look like versus someone who's, been in the field for 20 years and has worked their way up.
It's like peeking into the future of your potential career path.
Exactly. It's like a little sneak peek. And pay close attention to what they highlight in those profiles because they actually outline specific responsibilities and even some of their major achievements. Like, what did it take for them to reach that senior level position?
Oh, that's a great point. So it's not just about, like, here's their job title. It's about, here's what they've done. Here are the steps they've taken.
Precisely. And notice how the focus kind of shifts as you progress, as you gain more experience, as you move up the ladder. Well, a senior biology teacher, they're not just focused on, delivering those individual lessons day in and day out, although that's obviously still a huge part of it. But they might be developing curriculum for the entire school district, shaping how biology is taught to hundreds, thousands of students.
Wow, that's a huge responsibility.
It is. They could also be conducting their own research. Maybe we're even getting published in scientific journals, mentoring new teachers, kind of passing on that wisdom, or even presenting at conferences.
So they become, like, thought leaders in the field.
Exactly. You could even be shaping how biology is taught to an entire generation.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential impact you could have as a biology teacher. But how do you actually go about landing that dream job, right? That's where these RoleCatcher resources, they really get interesting, like mind-blowing interesting.
They have some really cool stuff in there.
This section about their jobs and interviews features, it blew my mind a little bit, I'm not going to lie.
What was it that really got you?
AI-powered job searching. It sounds like something out of, like, I don't know, a sci-fi movie.
Right, like robots are taking over the job search now.
Exactly.
But the thing is, and this is what's so crazy, it's not sci-fi anymore. It's like this is the reality of the job market. It's the here and now.
So how does it actually work for someone who's not, a tech genius?
Well, companies, they're increasingly using AI to basically streamline their hiring process, make it more efficient, more data-driven. And remember that part in the guide about the whole like automated recruiters thing?
Yeah, it talked about how a lot of applications, they don't even get seen by a real person at first, which is kind of scary.
Exactly. So RoleCatcher, it's almost like having, I don't know, like a secret weapon, to kind of navigate that whole like automated landscape.
It's like having a leg up in this world that's constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly. And, the guide, it even mentions how like the education job market, it can be pretty competitive, especially depending on where you're looking. So any edge that you can get is super valuable.
For sure. Can you give me an example? Like, how does this AI actually work in practice? Like, paint me a picture.
Okay, so let's say you're applying for this biology teaching position, right? And the job description, it specifically mentions they want someone with experience in, like virtual labs.
Which makes sense. A lot of schools are going virtual these days.
Right, so RoleCatcher's AI, what it can do is it can analyze that whole job description, like scan it, identify the keywords, the important phrases, and then it can actually suggest improvements to your CV.
CV.
Yeah, your curriculum vitae. It's like a resume, but a bit more, in-depth, more detailed, especially in academia.
Got it.
So it might suggest, hey, you should highlight that online course you took on, virtual lab simulations, or like you should really emphasize that summer program where you helped kids build robots, things like that.
So it's kind of like having a personal assistant who speaks the language of these automated systems.
Exactly. It helps you tailor your application to make sure it gets seen by the right people, or at least the right algorithms.
That's incredibly helpful, especially for someone who, like me, is not super tech savvy.
And the interesting thing is, and the guide kind of hints at this whole AI thing, it ties back to what we were talking about earlier with teachers needing to adapt to these new technologies.
It's like even to get the job, you have to be tech savvy.
In a way, yes. It's like you're learning a whole new language, but instead of like conjugating verbs, you're optimizing keywords,
I like that analogy. Okay, but this AI coaching thing, it goes even further than just the application process, right? I read something about it giving feedback on interview practice.
Yeah, you can actually record yourself answering common interview questions, and then the AI analyzes it, gives you personalized feedback.
Hmm.
Like, it analyzes your body language, your tone of voice, even like micro expressions, things that even you might not be aware of.
That is wild.
It's like having a personal coach giving you real-time feedback on your performance.
And speaking of coaching, which is kind of what this whole AI thing is, in a way, this career guide that you mentioned, it doesn't just like throw you into the deep end with all this information, right? It
Yeah.
actually walks you through all the steps of becoming a teacher, from like getting your teaching certification to exploring different biology
Right.
specializations.
It's very step by step, which is super helpful. And those
Right.
career stage example profile snippets, those are pure gold
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really like those. Why do you think they're so valuable?
because they actually showcase like real certifications that these professionals have at different points in their careers.
Which can be really helpful to kind of see, okay, if I want to go down this path, these are the steps I need to take. These are the qualifications I might need.
Exactly. So let's say you were really drawn to that like senior biology teacher track that we discussed earlier. You could look at the profiles of those individuals, see what certifications they hold, and then start thinking about, okay, which ones align with my goals? Which ones would be most beneficial for me to pursue?
It's like having a roadmap, not just for landing the job, but for like thriving in your career long term. And I love that the guide really emphasizes this importance of continuous learning.
It's not a one and done thing. You get your degree and then you're set for life.
Right. Things are changing all the time, especially in science.
Exactly. You have to be willing to adapt, learn new things, constantly refine your skills. And the guide, it actually makes a really good point about this.
What's that?
It talks about how education, it's a dynamic field, like
Mm.
by its very nature.
Hmm.
And the people who are going to really thrive, the ones who are going to be most successful, they're the ones who are most open to change, to learning new things.
It's inspiring, honestly. Like, we started with your goal of inspiring students, but now I'm feeling inspired by the career path itself.
Oh, no, right? It's pretty cool.
It's this idea that you're not just choosing a job, you're stepping into this whole world of possibilities.
And that's what's so exciting about being a biology teacher.
Yeah.
It's a career that's constantly evolving, both in the classroom, like with your students, and in the ways that you can kind of shape your path within it.
It's really clear that, becoming a biology teacher, it takes more than just knowing, like, the science stuff, right? You
Yes.
need passion, you need that resilience we were talking about, and you have to be willing to, like, embrace these new technologies, new ways of teaching. What really stood out to me about these RoleCatcher resources is they don't just tell you what to do, they actually give you the tools to do it and the knowledge.
It's about, taking charge of your career, your journey. Even the free version of RoleCatcher, it lets you make a really strong CV, connect with like potential employers, and even just stay organized throughout the whole like application process, which, let's be honest, can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes.
For sure. It's like having, what did you call it earlier? A personal career assistant right in your pocket. Okay, so we've got the tools, we've got kind of a roadmap, but what about the fuel, right? What does the guide say about the actual skills and knowledge you'd need to like really excel as a biology teacher?
Well, obviously, a deep understanding of biology is pretty important,
Hmm.
but it goes way beyond just like memorizing facts and figures. The guide really emphasizes being able to like break down those complex concepts, make them engaging and accessible to all different types of learners, which makes sense.
Because not all students learn the same way, right? We've touched on that a bit. And the guide reminds us, like, you're going to be working with teenagers. They come from all walks of life, each one with their own way of learning, their own strengths, their own challenges.
Absolutely. And that's where those soft skills come in, the ones you can't really teach in a textbook. Communication, patience, and you better have a good sense of humor. Remember that whole conversation we had earlier about dealing with unexpected situations in the classroom?
Only like a million.
The guide, it stresses how vital it is to be flexible, to think on your feet, to not like completely fall apart when things go wrong. Like that time, I had this meticulously planned volcano demonstration and I accidentally swapped baking soda for cornstarch.
Oh, no.
It was more of a fizz than an eruption, let's just say that. But hey, the kids learned something, right? Maybe not about volcanoes, but about thinking on your feet.
Exactly. Sometimes the biggest disasters make the best lessons. It sounds like a healthy sense of humor is pretty much non-negotiable for this job. But in all seriousness, those skills you mentioned, the adaptability, the creative problem solving, being willing to learn from your mistakes, those are valuable in any profession, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Those are the hallmarks of a lifelong learner, somebody who's always looking for new knowledge, new perspectives.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to our final thought for you today, Juan. We've explored the what, the why, even the how of becoming a biology teacher. But the real question is, what step, even a tiny one, can you take today to embrace that spirit of continuous learning?
Maybe it's just like brushing up on some biology basics. Maybe there's a new teaching technique you've been wanting to try. You could even just spend a few minutes poking around on RoleCatcher, exploring those cool features we talked about. The important thing is to start somewhere and keep that momentum going.
Because the journey of 1,000 dissections, or rather 1,000 lessons, it begins with a single curious step.
I love that. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of becoming a biology teacher. Huge thanks to our expert for sharing their insights. And as always, thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.